So I'll be asking some questions, and you can use the chat to, respond to it. Just now I heard that Elizabeth talked about, you guys have written some BRDs. How was it really? Do you want to drop that in the chat? How was the process like for you? So I'll be on lookout for that. And I'm going to share my very first experience with writing my BLD with you. So I just want to know how was it for you? Did you find it hard? Did you find it difficult? You know, what challenges did you face doing that? So while I'm waiting for more people to drop theirs in the chat, I'll start by saying that my very first BRD, it sucked. It wasn't all that, and I was fresh out of my boot camp that I joined for business analyst. We, learned a lot of theory, but no one really taught us what BRD should look like in the real world. So I went ahead, Googled some templates, just tried to stitch some things together, but still I felt lost. So, and it wasn't until when I started working on a real project before I understood more about what exactly ABRD is and the importance. So I'll be on the lookout for more, engagements in the chat, but I'll go on quickly to what I have next. So before we go into what a good BRD should look like, um, and what is expected of you as a business analyst, let's quickly define what exactly a BRD is. So a BRD is a high-level document that should highlight the business problem you're trying to solve and what goals you're trying to achieve and the requirements, so the solution, what this system or product should do to be able to meet that need. So think about it like it's a bridge between the stakeholders, the technical team, just giving clarity on what needs to be built exactly. So why it matters and what success would look like. So at the end of the day, the BRD should save you time, save you and your stakeholders time. It should reduce rework and it should keep everybody aligned. And writing a BRD, I have several experience writing BRDs and some of the mistakes that I've made. I'll be sharing that too along the line. And just talking about things that would help everyone create an outstanding BRD. So I'm sure that the most common thing is, you get to have a template, but you have to also understand the context, right? You have to understand the context. So for me, one of the surprises that I had was realizing that every organization has a different way of structuring their BRD. So some organizations will say, oh, we want it in a formal Google document. Some will say, oh, use Notion. Some will say, use Confluence. I even had from a senior colleague, he once told me that he created a BRD in Excel and it worked really well. So what you're trying to get to, it doesn't matter what system you're using to create your BRD. The goal is alignment, making sure that whatever you're trying to communicate is clear as day, and it doesn't matter what format, right? So before you get started in creating your BRD, what are the core questions you need to ask yourself? You'll start by asking, like, what problem are we trying to solve? Because the main goal of the BRD is to be able to, identify problems that your solution or whatever thing you and your stakeholders are bringing in is able to solve. So what problem are we solving? What does success looks like to us? and what solution do we need exactly. So once you understand this basic, it is easier for you to be able to adapt to any format. And I, for one, have seen different variations of BRD, like different variations of BRD. But if you are able to understand the core thing that you need to know, that way you are not, even if you move from one organization to another, you are able to adapt very well, right? So if we were starting from scratch, probably the organization you're working with, or you've been moved to, or you got employment in, they don't have like a standard structure for creating a BRD. What should you do, right? So here are some of the core elements that are found useful over the time. And the first thing is you have to have your overview. So then your business problem. So business problem or your business need. What is broken? What is missing? What is the actual issue? Right. And you also have to be able to define your objectives and goal. So I would say, what does success looks like at the end of the day? Then it's also very important for you to add your scope. What's going to be in the scope? What's going to be out of scope? This is going to help avoid scope creep, and just to keep everyone focused. And you have to be able to also list out your stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders involved? How is it impacting? What input do they even have in the requirement? And your functional and your non-functional requirements. Your functional requirements, that one talks about your features, the capabilities that the product would have, and the non-functional ones, things like performance, reliability, security, and you have to also be able to include your assumptions, because when you add your assumption and constraints, things are not, taken for granted, and you are able to understand the limiting factors and your dependencies. So one thing that I've seen in one template that I've seen for BRD in my organization, the template we use use cases. So our BRD would have use case and the use case scenario. But what I've learned is that um, it's not really, it is good to add your use case, but there's this table we have where we talk about the alternative parts. We go deep into like the use case scenario, right? So some organizations don't even need to have that. They don't have that. So that's where I was talking about, depending on the context of the organization, it is very important to know. But if you understand the basic things, it will be easy for you to be able to adapt in anywhere you find yourself, right? So your use case, your use case scenario, and you have to have like your visuals. So think about your as is, your to be, the process flow. This is just to help the team understand the vision and understand that you're building the right thing. Recently, another thing I've learned is that just because a requirement is listed in the BRD does not mean that all of those business requirements have to be implemented. Think about your BRD like something that is bound to change, bound to be improved on. It is not static, right? And that's just reality, honestly, because priorities will change, budgets will shift, some features will even get dropped after testing. So a great BRD should actually support decision making, not just you documenting. So think about it like, it is bound to change. It is bound to change. Your requirements, because it's listed there, does not mean that, that's how it's going to be forever. So that's why I recommend, ask before, when you move into a new organization, ask from the team, do they have like a template? And if they don't, with the knowledge shared, you'll be able to build something from scratch yourself if you understand the basic things. And when you are able to get templates from the organization you're working with, it's easier for you to have it's easier for you to get guided. But I know that sometimes we might not have that luxury, so to say, that some organizations are just startup. They don't really have anything in place. But if you understand the core, the basis, it is easier for you to be able to refine it, fine tune it, and adapt to it. So those are some of the experience that I've learned from creating BRDs. You don't need to, when creating your BRDs, it may suck at first. You get better with time. The very first BRD I created, when I look back at it, I just smile at myself like, oh, was this not like it was totally bad, but due to experience, I'm able to understand that this is what we need to add to it, this is what we need to remove. Sometimes you even need to keep it as lean as possible. The structure, where you're meant to add in it is is a guide, right? So for like someone that is in product, the kind of content you would, or the kind of the way you structure your BRD if you're in product will definitely be different if you are someone in maybe business improvement or policy, something like that. So actually there is really no universal standard. The BABOK offers best practices, but it doesn't really enforce like a strict BRD structure. So the companies will tailor the format to match their own internal workflow to align with the project management style. So if it is waterfall, if it is agile, and to make sure it actually satisfy the executive and the regulatory expectation rather. So every organization have their own different formats. So because they have different business goals, a bank might focus heavily more on like compliance and risk. A startup might care more about like the MVP features, right? A government agency might emphasize regulations and procurement. So every organization would have their own format depending on their different business goals. Thing that most BAs would ask is that what is, how long how long should your BRD be? Does it have to be long? What is the standard number of pages that you need and things like that? Well, I won't say that you shouldn't focus more on like length, right? It should be more of clarity. So if it takes you 5 pages to communicate the problem and solution well, that's fine. If it takes you 15, that's also fine. But also make sure that you are not writing fluff. You're not just writing to just write for documentation purpose, right? Because think of your BRD like, because if you leave the organization and someone else, another BA comes to the project, the first thing they're going to ask is, what is the documentation we have on ground? So it is important that your documentation is clear and it's communicating the problem and the solution well, right? So the length of the BRD doesn't really determine. It's just making sure that it is more about you communicating clearly and your problem and the solution. So another question could be that who should review your BRD? Your BRD, usually your products, your business sponsor, your product owner, um, the devs, some can review it. They can review the BRD. You're actually creating it for them to also be able to understand the context, understand the problem you're solving, just to make sure they're all aligned. And if you're it's very, very great, it is very advisable to include like visuals. So another thing you may experience, I have gone through that some in another project. So like if you're creating your as is, your to be, right? For instance, if you're creating an app, or you're working with an organization that have an app in place, you probably will just need to add, like, we already have this in place, right? Except it's something that has to do with like the internal process. You may not necessarily need to create like a process flow for that. You just need to say, we have something like this in place already, and this is where we want to get to with the solution we are offering. So you can include visuals. This will just help to reduce confusion and ensure that people have clarity. So you don't also need to follow like a fixed format. Just make sure that it is structured. It is very structured, and understand what your team needs, because you're not writing the BRD for just yourself. I learned somewhere that most executives, they don't really even have time to look through large documentation, and that's why your objectives, your executive summary is very important. So if an executive is meant to pick up your BRD, in your summary, are they able to understand exactly what you are trying to do, exactly what you're trying to solve? So I know we have like the advent of like, AI tools to help us to, create this documentation, but make sure that it's not just filled with jargon and fluff. Jargon like, oh, simplify it, make sure that anyone picking it up, both the business people, the business side, the technical people, they are able to understand exactly what they need to build or to be done. So stakeholders can want to change something in the BRD, and that's why we have change control. So if there is any changes any stakeholder might want to have or do to the BRD, yeah, it has to go through like a formal change request, and we have to review why the stakeholder wants to actually make that changes, right? So your BRD is not something that you've done and you just leave, or it has to be exactly like that. Know that there will be different things that would happen. No project are the same. You may foresee that things would go exactly this way, and things just move out of what you planned. So have that at the back of your mind, that your requirements, your BRD is bound to change at some point. So it is a guide. It is not something that it has to be enforced. So it's a guide to just make sure that everyone is aligned with what you're trying to build or the problem you're trying to solve. So the different tools, you can use Word, you can use Confluence. If your organization focus more on documenting in Confluence, that would be the best place to keep things for organization's sake. You can use Word document as well to create your BRD. Organizations you're working with, they are trying to solve a problem. It's just like you're a business owner. You want to create a solution for a business. And all the things you need to get done, you've done your research, you've done everything, you then have a document. They are saying, I want to give this to the people that are going to implement the solution. I can't, or you as a business analyst, it is not in your place to share that, because it's as if you're giving out what's this is as if you're giving out everything from the company to whoever, and it's not a good practice. So even some of my work, when you check my LinkedIn, I don't share my company's job there. I would rather create something generic from the scratch and show that out, because people are building solutions every day, and it is my own responsibility to make sure that it is we're covering the organization, right? So best practice is that whatever you as a business analyst you're documenting for the organization you're working with, it is not a good practice for you to share that out, because you don't know who is your competitor, and all that. And it's just like you risking your organization for whatever purpose you're doing that for. So I have a BRD template that I can show. So I'm just checking through that right now. And I can show that is not filled, I guess. It's not, there's no information there, but you are able to understand the structure of what that would look like. Like I said, depending on the context of the organization, that's how you're going to, work on the BRD. So why it is important to add visuals, like I explained, is just to give more clarity on exactly what is, just the way we are humans. If I'm here now and I just keep talking till like 5 p.m., people will get worn out. People will get tired, right? But if I am talking and I have something to show, like a presentation, like images, videos, it's going to get people more interested and engaged. So it is great to visualize, because also aside from even making them engaged, it makes the stakeholders be able to spot things early on. So for instance, now I said this is my to be desired state. I created a process flow for my desired state. If I come to you, Mooney, and I say, oh Mooney, I have this document, like 15 pages of document, and I have a picture of exactly what I have in that document, I know for sure, except maybe I'm assuming here, you will definitely pick the picture, like the image representation of what that is, because who has time to flip through a lot of pages? So the length is not the it's not the most important. It's just making sure that it is clear. People can pick it up and say, yes, I understand exactly what needs to be done, right? I can say, oh, Muni has documented this. This is very great. I understand that this is the problem we're trying to solve. These are business driver. These are stakeholders that are involved. This is the functional requirements, etc. So the one you saw mock-up now, the business document BRD you saw mock-up, it could be for a product team. If it was for like bank context would be a bit different, because they're not really great about, they're not the organization is more focused on making sure that everyone's fund is safe. So you'll be seeing things more of like, oh, what are the risks? What are the things like that, just to make sure that that's what they're heavily focused on. So it's not really about the length. It's not really about the length. It's about the clarity. And if you want to include mockup, I have not really seen a BRD that has mockup, but I've seen BRD with like what's it called now? Process flows. Some even add like wireframes and things like that. But depending on the organization's context, and that's why you have to understand the basics. Again, BAC does not really have like, oh, this is the strict thing you have to follow. It's just understanding what are the basic thing that needs to be there. Then how do I then adapt it into my organization's context in such a way that is speaking the language you want to hear. And another important thing in BRDs is there's this area where you get to like document the jargon that you've added, so that people can understand what exactly you are referring to. Because some organization now, for instance, in one organization I worked at, we would say FF. FF means Freelancer Friday, right? But if I come to you and say, oh, I'm going to FF, you'll be like, what is FF? So you have to also be able to add your glossary in where you get to abbreviate. Other company could say, oh, I'm building fintech. What is fintech, you might ask? But it's only the internal people that can understand that, oh, fintech means this, FF means this. So you also have to be able to add your glossary in your BRD so that if anyone that is not on the project team that picking it up, they are able to understand like, oh, this is exactly what this person is talking about, right? This is exactly what they are saying, and this is exactly what they are talking about. So I would, I have my, I have the one BRD that I can share right now. In one of my colleague that I've worked with, she's, you know, so what you just need to ask yourself is that, does this BRD cover this question? Does it cover the problem you are solving? Does it cover what the success would look like? And does it really state the solution? So all of this is just like you want to build a house now, and definitely you have to buy a land. Definitely you have to probably draw up a plan, you know, before that house is built. So it's just the different, but you know that before buying your land, there might be several different processes of buying your land, right? Maybe you have to then research a property manager, a real estate agency, different things. Like what I'm trying bringing it back is just ask yourself these three questions: does it state the problem you are solving? Does it share what success would look like? And does it also state the solution we need to solve? And these core elements would include your project overview, or your summary, your business problem and the need, the goals, the scope, the stakeholders, the functional requirements, your dependencies, your risk, your business drivers. All those things are just elements of what that should contain. So, and if you're unsure, ask away, ask questions from people. If you're unsure, you should ask questions as well. But if you're able to like ask yourself that, did this person capture this problem well? Did they capture the solution? Also, were they able to capture what success would look like eventually when we finish up with this project? Then I think that that would be able to give you the basics of how to spot any gaps in the BRD.
Okay.
And this template is, also another mistake that I see that some business analysts make is that they just write their BRD, but they don't include version controls. BRDs would eventually be signed off, right? So you have to be able to include version controls. So have you updated your version 1, version 2, and things like that? Also, you have to add signature. Like this one now is not here. Document number, version creator. You have to be able to add a place where people are able to sign off on it, maybe here or at the end of it, right? Because it has to be signed off. If you're working in a very large organization with like different levels of people, it has to probably move from your team lead to your, like that. There has to be version control, and there has to be a place where people can sign. Also, your summary. So this is where you have like a snapshot. And I was talking about making sure that this place, and I got this was from an executive in one of the leading banks in Nigeria. He shared with me that if anyone shares a document with him, and from the executive summary, he can't understand what the person is trying to communicate, he's not going to read it. Like, he doesn't care, right? So you make sure that this area is giving that you're not too detailed, because executives don't, you're not going deep, but you are giving like a snapshot, like, oh, this is an overview, right? And you can add your description here and the scope. So this is where you get to add, what's in scope, what's out of scope, right? What are we doing? What are our deliverables? What are our goals, right? And your business drivers, why are you even doing this thing, right? Why are you doing this? Why do you need to do it? What's the point of doing it? That's where you get to talk about your business drivers. Sometimes in these business drivers, right, it doesn't even have to be. That's why I said adapt. Like your this is not a rigid structure. These business drivers now, it does not have to be in a table. You can just list it and provide example, right? So that's where the experience and expertise of like, oh, your BA coming. You don't have to like, oh, it has to be exactly this way, right? So if I were to go over this, then I would say I would include like a place where I can list my stakeholders here, right? Where I can list the people that worked on the project in the top part here, right? And I would also add the name of the company, their logo, right? So it's branded. Um, we've talked about drivers. This is the present process. So this is where you can add your flow charts. This is just your as is. What's the current process looking like? Then this is your proposed one. Then your to be. That's your to be. Where do we want to get to, right? With this solution that we are proposing. Then your functional requirements. Also, in other BRD that I've worked on, we do business requirements, your functional requirements, and your non-functional requirements, right? So the business requirements would be, oh, as a staff, I want to be able to upload Google images in the drive. So this is the information you've elicited from the stakeholders, the business, what the business people actually need. So that's another case of BRD. I've seen that, right? You do. I've worked on that as well too. You do your business requirements where you get just list out the basic epics and you go into your functional requirements, then you know functional requirement. So, but if you are able to understand the basics, the core, it is easier for you to say, oh, this thing is missing. Let me include um, business requirements here, right? Then another thing that I see again, and when people are adding their functional, like if I were to add functional requirement, I wouldn't just put it here as I'll put it as a table. The functional requirement, I'll put it as a table. It will have the requirement ID, it will have the user story, it will have the priority, it will have like the stakeholders that's shared, or just those necessary things. And that's why I said it is not it is not you don't have to pick a template and say, "Ah, this is exactly how it's meant to be." No, right? So this one you get to add which one is, and if I was going over this, I would probably just remove, instead of um priority. This is trend show priority. I would prefer to use the must have. Is it a must have? Is it a should have? Is it a could have? Right? Rather than, oh, is it high? Is it low? Things like that. And some people even they are just so this is where we get to see like the ID, the requirements, the priority, who raised it, who shared this with us. So again, another question, I asked this question. I struggled with it when I started out. I was like, wait, how did they come to add the ID? How did they know that this one here has to be RQ1, RQ2, RQ3? It's just numbers. When I created a BRD recently for a client's project for the consulting agency I'm working for, and I came up with the ID. But the ID that I used, the ID number, no, the ID number was what was added to the Jira ticket. So that way, whatever ID is on the BRD is exactly what we have in the Jira. Why I did that is because of traceability, right? Why I did that is because of yeah, the ID address number. So why I did that is just because of traceability. The for instance, when I created the Jira ticket, at first I um went ahead and just made sure that if somebody picked my BRD and they moved to where we have the tickets uploaded, they're able to say, oh, this requirement, where is it here? Right? Is just good for traceability. That's one I saw the use and benefit of it. So your non-functional requirement. I also talked about the glossaries, the glossary of them, where you get to add your jargon, explain. If you are saying FF, what does FF mean in any of the things you stated in your BRD, in the content you've shared earlier, so that if, for instance, I've created a BRD now and LL is another organization and LL wants to like review it, I would say you when he goes to the glossary session, he's able to say, oh, so this is what they mean here when she said RFQ. Because I'm like, what does RFQ mean? Because different organizations have their different lingo, they have their different abbreviation, they have their different things. So it's easier for you to, just add it and explain that, oh, RFQ mean this, FF means this, FITEC means this, right? Then if you pick any references from any websites, you can add that here. I don't it's again, some BRD might necessarily not have this. Then your appendix where you get to add any additional information, and you close out by that. So research to be done on, like, what are the problem you're solving. So I wouldn't say having like documents in place really, because how I get to do my own process for writing a BRD just entails like gathering information from people. So the process, I wouldn't say what are the documents, I would say maybe what are the process. So because it's not just a document you'll be needing. In, let's say for instance, your Aziz now, where you want to include the process flow, you probably don't need a document for that. So what are the process you need to be able to say, oh, I've done this process, then I want to do my BRD. Probably need like a mind map session with the clients or with the stakeholders you are eliciting this information from, where you are able to like dig deeper, right? Where you're able to dig deeper and understand, oh, this is the problem. Oh, this is what we actually want to solve. This is where we want to get to, right? So it's a process of you gathering information, eliciting these things that you need to be able to have more understanding of the thing you want to solve before you say. So I wouldn't say a document per se. I wouldn't say document. Some people would also say, oh, before we go ahead, you can create a business case where you get to like justify why we need to get something done and things. So you might probably need maybe a business case, but I wouldn't say document. I would say probably the process. So what does the process entail? You have to elicit information. You have to do your research before saying, no, this is the problem. This is the problem. Before you say this is the problem, even though the stakeholders say, oh, this is the problem, have you done your research to know that is exactly the problem? What if it was omitted? What if something was omitted? So it's more of like eliciting, getting research done to be able to see, oh, this is the next step I want to do to creating my BRD. Again, I wouldn't say a document. It's more of like what are the process that is involved.
Okay.
And also it's also subject to organization context. As BAs itself, we are not to just go ahead and do things. You have to understand the context of the organization. So the organization might say, oh, before you even go ahead and do a BRD, we have to put this in place. But my own process is what I'm sharing. And what I do is making sure that I'm able to elicit information first. So when I say stakeholders, it's not just the client alone, it's not just the end users alone. It could be checking back on documentations that have been done in the previous project, in that same project, or that have been done previously. I'm also still in the process of eliciting information, right? So it does not have to be, oh, there's a particular document I have to visit before doing my BRD. To put as is and to be processed before functional and non-functional requirements. Well, I wouldn't care so much about the structure, like the what needs to be in place first. But what I've seen so far is that based on like the different BRDs that I've seen so far is version control, the introduction, the business problem where you're trying to solve, the stakeholders involved, then before before sometimes it's used interchangeably actually. You can add the Aziz before the Aziz and to be before the functional requirements and non-functional requirements. But I wouldn't say it has to be that way, right? I won't say it has to be that way. That, oh, if it's not that way, then it is a bad BRD. No, the goal is to make sure that anybody that is going to pick up your BRD, they have an understanding of this is the problem I'm solving, this is the solution we are getting to, this is how we want to get there. So I wouldn't flog the, oh, does one thing has to come first before another thing. It's more about the flow, understand, let people understand that this is what we want to get to, and anyone that picks it up, they're able to understand.
These all the things you worked on during this session, during this BA challenge. Keep it in your repository. It's gonna come in handy. You heard Temi, most of the things we work on in our companies, we can't share them with anybody. We can only talk about it and say, oh, I did a BRD. Show me now. I'm sorry, I can't. You know. But things like this you work on during your challenge, it's yours and it's yours. Nobody can take it away from you, right? So everything you worked on during this challenge, keep it in your repository. If it means building your own Behance portfolio, please do keep a repository of all the things you work on. Please do keep a repository of it. You need it. You need it. And one thing I'm going to say again about the whole BA environment is no BA is an autonomy of knowledge at all. If you ever get stuck anywhere, anytime, there's always a BA beside you, in your office or out of your office. Lady B and I, we brainstorm a lot of times. We do. All right. So there's no BA that knows it all. I can bet if I ask Temi now, she will tell me an example of her this week. Me too. Because that's how we work, that's how we operate. Okay, so even in the BRD, you've not finished learning, you get another opportunity and you might get stuck. Consult the brain power in the room. That's what my boss will always say. Consult that brain power. Now your colleague that used to make noise so much, it will shock you the amount of wisdom he has. All right. So business analysis training is still ongoing, and within your community, within those that are in your corner, please let them know that BAMS Academy, excuse me, let them know that BAMS Academy is taking no-code tech skills, which includes business analysis amongst others. We have data analytics, we have product management, we have digital marketing, and we have product design, right? So these courses are available.